Hey guys, Cows here. This is an update for my 3.7 MFTS build guide. I wanted to go over some budget gear, some endgame gear in standard, and your choices for league. I've also reworked the passive tree a little bit to make more sense for 3.7.3, and done a little bit of changes here and there to like gems and things like that, so I'll go over those. But overall, this build should be pretty like all-encompassing. After you listen to whatever I'm going to say for the next 30 minutes, you should be able to know the ins and outs of the build. Okay, so I know one of the concerns I got on my last build was budget gear, so I'm going to go over that now. A lot of people want to know how they can start this build cheaply in League, so we'll do that first. Long story short, your options for the helmet are Devotos, Starkhounders, and Rat's Nest. All three will give you some sort of thing that synergizes with the build. So specifically, Devotos gives you attack speed and movement speed, Starkhounders gives you life, crit chance, and attack speed, Rat's Nest gives you attack speed, crit chance, movement speed, and rarity. Any of these will work. I recommend specifically Devotos because it gives you movement speed and attack speed and the most movement speed out of all of them. So because that's really what's going to help you get through the maps quicker is the movement speed. So this to me seems like the best option. But if you want more life, you want a more defensive option, I'd go Starkonjas. And if you have a Rat's Nest, I'd use it, but I'd use one of these two over Rat's Nest. They're all about a chaos in League. They don't cost you anything. So they're an easy option to pick up, and they're unique, so they're common and cheap. Sedimas is the option for League. This can roll between 5 and 10% increased quantity of items found. Obviously, a higher quantity roll is more expensive. A low quantity roll is about a chaos. It's not really that much. This item is very common, and it's the only option in League for quantity in the glove slot. Because it's the only option in League, because it's only capped at 10% quantity, you can choose to use it if you have a nice roll, or you can choose to drop this in the glove slot for something like a pair of gripped gloves or any other rare gear, or a pair of Tomb Fists, or its Ears Acuity, something like that. So any other pair of gloves, if you don't think that this quantity is relevant for you, you can use. Bisco's is the budget amulet, I think. So in League, you can get what's called a shaped 10% quantity amulet. Those can get pretty expensive, especially with good rolls. So Bisco's is also relatively expensive, but on the cheaper side in terms of like how expensive the amulet slot can get. So I think this is the way to do it. A mediocre rolled one will cost you about 10, 15, 20 chaos. This gives you, increased quantity of items dropped by slaying normal enemies and rarity dropped by magic enemies. At the end of the day, it's not as good as a 10% shaped quantity amulet, but this will get you there cheaply. Bisco's Lease is the budget option for the belt. It gives you quantity in the belt slot. It also gives you rampage and rarity per 15 rampage kills. Rampage gives you movement speed as you kill more monsters. And for some reason, it gives you a little bit of cold res. No one knows why, but it does. Goldworm is it's not really a budget option, but it's the only option for quantity in the boot slot in League. So this is really what you're stuck with. They can be expensive. A max rolled one could be about an X. A mediocre one could be about 5C, 10C, 20C, 30C, somewhere in there. So I put it at 20C, but you could see lower, you could see higher. Then for League, your ring slots are pretty much, again, like Goldworms, kind of slotted for you. You have the option to use a White Socket Pariah. I don't think that that's a very good budget option for two reasons. One, it's more expensive than Aventors. Two, it doesn't have resistances on it. And in League, one of the issues you have with this build is because you use so many uniques, you need to find resistances in your gear. Aventor's Gamble happens to be one of the few uniques in the game where you can roll a bunch of resistances on, plus quantity. It's the only one you can do that on, exactly. So if you can get a high quantity roll, max life, and good resistances, you can see this item cost a lot of money, right? It could be like 5x, 10x, 15x. But if you get a mediocre one with like some decent res, some decent quantity, some okay life, it could cost like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50C. So this is like the option. I recommend people go with a mediocre Ventors with decent res, decent life, and okay quantity because they're cheaper generally than a high quantity Ventors. And because they'll help you cap your res and they'll keep you alive and you'll level better and you'll more consistently find items because you won't be dying as much because your res is capped. So I think this is actually really the way you should go. Instead of just trying to be like, oh, I want a 10% quantity amulet, fuck anything else that's on this item, you should go with a mediocre one and cap your res. If that's what you need. If you don't need res, then get as high quantity as you want. Okay, so those are the budget items for the build. Now we'll get into the not so budget items. I'm going to go over my gear for standard because I know a lot of people who use this build are trying to min-max it in standard. So go over that. The League options are, pretty similar to the budget gear. You don't really have much variation in that, but I will go over what you should be using in League at the end of the day, right? If you have good gear, what you should be using. So In Standard or in League, you use a Wind Ripper. In Standard, you have the option to get a double Legacy Wind Ripper, which is 25% increased quantity of items dropped by slain frozen enemies. In League, so there are 3 versions of Wind Ripper. This is the oldest version, the 3rd version of Wind Ripper. The newest version of Wind Ripper has comparatively less crit chance, 15% increased quantity of items dropped by slain frozen enemies, and I think the damage rolls on it are comparatively higher to make up for the lower crit chance. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the elemental damage rolls are higher. But long story short, there really isn't that big of a difference in terms of damage between this build, this bow, and the other one. The real big kicker is the quantity. This legacy version of Wind Ripper can be very expensive, up to a mirror. The newest versions can be maybe 50C, 60C, and if you want them 6 length, you have to factor in the 6 linking cost. In the ring slot on Standard, you have the option to use a legacy quantity base. This is just a 20% increased quantity of items found legacy gold ring. In League, you should use Aventors or Pariah with 10% increased quantity of items found. You really don't have any other options in League. But in Standard, you can use this. In Standard, you could also use a good roll of Aventors. You could also use a Pariah. But at the end of the day, this is the best item in the slot. For the gloves, again, legacy quantity gear is the best slot in Standard. You want max life, damage, attack speed, crit chance, wed, stuff like that, crafted on this thing plus the quantity roll. In the League, your option is Sedima's, which is over here again. Max roll is 10%. In Standard, again, you want the Headhunter belt. This is a very expensive item, especially with the changes to 3.7 where they made it harder to obtain. You can, on Standard, run a well-rolled Stygian Vise with life, res, and wed. You can do the same on League and replace the Bisco's Leash, but I recommend you use a Bisco's Leash in League. And we'll go over some changes to the build that I've made that specifically revolve around Headhunter and inspired learnings instead of Headhunter, so that makes it slightly more budget for League, but I'll go over that in a minute. But again, at the end of the day, the best item in the slot is Headhunter in both League and Standard. Queen of the Forest is the only chest you should be using for this build. This is a legacy version. There is a newer version with comparatively less evasion rating, and the 1% increased movement speed for 450 evasion on this chest is harder to obtain on the new one because it's 1% increased movement speed per 600 evasion rating, up to 75%. So you need more evasion rating with the newer version of Queen of the Forest. And that is going to require just one minor change in terms of your flasks. So on Standard, you can use a flask that, a Jade Flask without the percent increased evasion rating mod. But on League, you'd have to use that, and I'll go over that later, and it'll make more sense. In Standard, you want to use a 20% quantity of items found legacy base, right? So this just happens to be one I've mirrored. It's from Demigod King. Well, I didn't mirror it. I bought it from someone who mirrored it. But the main part of this helmet is the quantity, but also the Tornado Shot fires 2 additional secondary projectiles enchant. This is a big, more multiplier to your damage. So if you can find in League one of these 3 helmets, Devotos, Darkonas, or Rat's Nest with the enchant on it, that's a big bonus to your damage, but it's also way more expensive. They can be like 10, 15x. Or you can find a rare helmet with life, res, and the enchant. That's good enough too. In the amulet slot, on League, you want to use the Bisco's collar, which is the one I have here, a 10% shaped quantity amulet. But on Standard, again, you have access to a legacy base. That's a 20% increased quantity of items found base here that I have. You just want whatever stats you need on here. I have lightning res because I needed lightning res, projectile speed, projectile damage, and wed. It's probably a pretty shitty multi-mod, all things considered. But it's what I needed to sort of fill out my build. Again, another ring with 20% increased quantity of items found. We talked about what you should use here. This is what I have on Standard. Again, in League, Ventors or Pariahs, but you should be using. Boots or Goldworm. On Standard, you can get a legacy version that rolls up to 30% quantity of items found. On League, the max is 20%. This is a current version of Goldworms in the game. On Standard, you also have the option to use a legacy quantity base. I am not using one in the boot slot because the maximum quantity you can get on a legacy base is 20. The legacy version of Goldworm is 30, so I thought the difference there, with 10% quant, is relevant for me, so I chose to use the unique option here, which is Goldworm, versus a legacy quantity base where I could have, say, rolled movement speed and res and damage on instead. In the quiver, you want to use Rigwald's Quills. This is the option for both League and Standard. The cheaper version of League would be to use like a drill neck or to use a rare shaped a rare shaped amulet with, what am I even saying? A rare shaped quiver with +1 projectiles, or something like multi res life, crit chance, something like attack speed, res, movement speed. You can get a whole bunch of stuff on a rare quiver that can be relevant for the build. But at the end of the day, the thing you want is the Rigwald's Quills, because it gives you fork, because it gives you some increased projectile damage. It also gives you a little bit of res, and you get life for enemy hit by your attacks. But the main thing about this quiver is projectiles fork. It helps you clear, and it, packs screens away in conjunction with chain and some of the other mechanics this build utilizes. So Rigwald's has a base implicit of, I think, up to 30% accuracy rating, global accuracy rating. This can be okay because they've now made it so that you can cap your hit chance with, minor investments in accuracy. But I still think that the best option here is, a corruption with like flat elemental damage, bow attacks, fire an additional arrow, +1 chain. What else is there? Damage per enemy pierced. I can't think of any other good ones for this build specifically, but there are a bunch of options for the corruption here. Try and get one with like flat elemental damage to attacks. That one shouldn't be so expensive, compared to the base item. But something like bow attacks, fire an additional arrow, which you see here, or skills chain 1 +1 times, can be astronomically more expensive. I think I bought this for like 150x on standard, so they can be pretty crazy in terms of their price. As far as flasks go, you want an Alchemist Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. This is the most movement speed you can get out of a single flask in the game. It gives me something like 80% movement speed, I think, because it's 29% from the 29% from the explicit, 40% from the implicit, and another 10% from the explicit. So on standard, if you're using a Legacy Queen, you don't need to use a Jade Flask of Reflexes to cap your evasion. But if you're in League, you want to use a Jade Flask of Reflexes to cap your evasion. The reason being is because you need more evasion in League to get the full benefit of Queen of the Forest. Because, like I said before, it's 1% increased movement speed for 600 evasion rating, up to 75%, compared to this version of the Queen of the Forest, which is the Legacy version, that is 1% movement speed for 450 evasion rating, up to 75%. Next, you want to use you can use any kind of Diamond Flask of Staunching here. The important point is to have bleeding on this flask, because this is the flask you're going to have up all the time. And you want to be able to, not die to bleeding, because for those of you who don't know, when you move with bleeding, you take extra damage, right? And this build goes super fast. You're moving all the time, so you can almost like one-shot yourself, kind of. You can really just drain your life pool instantly by running super fast with bleeding on you. So that you want to have this flask up the entire time, so you don't die to that. On standard, you have the option to use a Bottled Faith. This is a really good flask because it gives you base crit against enemies on consecrated ground. You also get the added effect of consecrated ground when enemies are standing on it, so you have increased critical strike chance against them. And then you also have consecrated ground created during the effect applies 10% increased damage taken to enemies. So this gives you a ton of damage on mobs, but this is only an option for standard. In League, you can swap this out for like in a series promise. You can swap this out for, curse immunity, sulfur flax, just to give you extra damage, and consecrated ground and some curse immunity. You can sub this out for, I don't know, really any flask you want. I have no idea, but this is purely for extra damage, and this slot is very replaceable. The one that isn't replaceable in terms of unique flasks, though, is Dying Sun. This is a huge DPS boost. It gives you 2 additional projectiles during the flask effect. And what scales our damage the most is added projectiles, right? Because added projectiles mean we're shooting more arrows. Those arrows are shooting more secondary projectiles, and those secondary projectiles are chaining more and forking more. So this gives a ton more damage to your build. So get a Dying Sun if you can. It is expensive. It's probably going to be like an extra 2 in League. In Standard, it's about 120 chaos, I think, maybe something like that. 100 chaos. I'm not really sure. I haven't checked it out. I can tell you right now, though. It is. Oh, it's cheap in Standard. I guess it's 50 chaos. All right, so there you go. This is an expensive option for Standard. I think it's something like 30x. 26. All right, so there you go. So that's the gear. I can go over my offhands. On Standard, you have options. Right, so you have synthesis items that have quality as an implicit. For those of you who are leveling stuff like Enlightens, this is important because it gives the gem more experience, right? And empowers, same thing. But on League, you don't need that option. On League, you can just run 2 offhands, all blues, so that you can level Enlightens in here, and that's going to give you the most profit per hour. Passive tree. Okay, so I'll go over the Ascendancy first. I haven't made any changes to it, and I think it's the easiest thing to explain. So in terms of order, you want to go up here and to the left to grab Ricochet. Ricochet gives you projectiles deal 10% more damage for each remaining chain, and skills chain +1 times. So it gives you more damage in chain. Chain helps you clear mobs and clear packs very quickly because you're shooting so many secondary projectiles with Tornado Shot. They're all chaining, and they all hit all the mobs, and it kind of makes like a chain reaction, if you will, of damage applying to each monster, and that is going to kill everything. Endless Munitions, probably second. It gives you accuracy rating, which is important to help your hit chance. Area of effect, not so relevant. And skills fire an additional projectile. Additional projectiles, like I said before, give us a lot of damage. The last thing is up to you. If you want to be a fast boy, which is the point of this build, you grab Gathering Winds, because this gives you Tailwind. Tailwind is a how do I explain? It's a movement speed, like it's an action speed multiplier. So it doesn't give you flat movement speed. It multiplies your action speed. It's a tough way. I don't really know how to explain this too well, but action speed encompasses like all of the things you do. So any animation your character does, movement speed, attack speed, it encompasses all of that. So this will make you like 20% more faster. Does that make any sense? I don't really know how to explain that too well, but it is a big boost to your damage. It also gives you some evasion rating, which helps you cap with Queen of the Forest. It's just an all-around great node. You can also take Fast and Deadly if you really want. This gives you attack speed, projectile damage, global accuracy rating, which is a big deal, and increased blink arrow and mirror arrow cooldown if you want to just blink around fast. You can take Powerful Precision, which gives you pierce, crit chance, and more pierce, or you can take Rupture, which gives you bleeding, multi, crit chance. Moving while bleeding doesn't cause you to take more damage, and you get instant leech in terms of hitting enemies or hitting bleeding enemies. I think at the end of the day, the best option is Gathering Winds. Tailwinds is OP. It's a great node, and I wouldn't take any of these over it. But if you're someone who doesn't give a shit about the movement speed, you want more damage, grab one of these. Okay, on to the rest of the tree. You can start either direction here. You can start up here and go with damage. You can start down here and go with life. I choose to go with damage because fuck life. I just want to hit things and have them die. So you move over this way, you grab some damage and movement speed, move down this way, grab some life, grab some more attack speed, accuracy rating, and dex. Then the tree diverges. You go this way, you go this way. We'll cover this part of the tree first, and we'll cover this part of the tree second. You move down here to grab a couple things. One is this jewel node, this jewel node, and this jewel node, and this jewel node. The other thing is you want to move down here to grab Art of the Gladiator, which gives you attack speed, global accuracy rating, ignoring all movement penalties from armor, which isn't so relevant for our build because we don't have a lot of armor. But also because you can move towards the projectile wheel, which gives you damage. You can move towards the big life node here, which gives you life. And you can move towards the big life node here, which gives you a ton of life. But the main point of moving over here is because there's 4 jewel sockets, 1, 2, 3, 4, that are in close proximity to each other, and you want to grab all of them. Because jewel sockets are how we add a lot of damage to our build, because we can add a bunch of flat lightning, flat cold, max life, etc. And I'll go over that at a later time in this build guide. So we go over here on this side of the tree because we have access to point blank. Right, point blank is a more multiplier to our damage. Basically, the closer we are, the more damage we do to dudes. The farther we are, the less damage we do to them. You also want to grab this jewel socket. I have my Watcher's Eye in here. I guess I'll explain this now because I'll probably forget to do it later. The mod 15% increased movement speed while affected by Grace gives us more movement speed, right? Because we run Grace to help cap our Queen of the Forest. 15% movement speed is a free 15% movement speed, and this jewel also comes with a max roll 6% increased maximum life, so it does some stuff for us. If you can get this jewel with another relevant aura like Wrath or Precision, that's really good for you. I just happen to have lightning damage as leeched as mana while affected by Wrath. I don't actually run Wrath, but sometimes when I run in party with an Orbot, this becomes a relevant stat, and that's why I have it on there. Okay, you move this way so you can have crit chance and crit multi. You move over here so you can get some elemental damage with attacks and penetration. You go up here, and this is where things start to get interesting. So I'm running 2 Inspired Learnings in this build. Inspired Learnings are a lot like Headhunter. When you kill a monster, you gain one of its modifiers for 20 seconds. The caveat to this jewel is that you have to have 4 notables allocated within its radius. A notable is this kind of bigger node. Like this is a notable, this is a notable, this, like these like medium-sized nodes. So this just happens to be a really easy place where you can get a bunch of notables that make sense for the build. So you have an option here. You can grab, I recommend you grab Herbalism, Acuity, and Heartseeker. and then you change the fourth notable to either Survivalist or Fervor. I just grab Fervor because I don't need the extra res from here. And then you can obviously take this jewel slot, and Inspired Learning will work. When you kill a monster, you gain one of its mods. It's basically a headhunter, but on your passive tree. Okay. Then we move up this way and we grab Acrobatics. We move over here to grab the Jewel Socket and get another Jewel there. We move left on the tree and grab the Penetration and Elemental Damage nodes here. You can grab Life here if you want to. I just happen to not do that. You can move over here and grab another Jewel Socket. You can move up the tree here and grab some Life, some Crit Chance, and Crit Multiplier. And you move all the way over here to get some Intelligence, because this is very important for, meeting the requirements for the build. That's why I path up this way instead of, for example, up this way to this Jewel Socket or something, because you want the Intelligence. And, there's a Jewel Socket that's on the way. Then you path, up here from this node, and you have another option for a Inspired Learning. This one is not active in my build. I actually haven't taken the nodes up here, but you'd go up here and you'd grab, one of these nodes or something. I was just playing around with my passive tree and I removed some nodes. That's why this one doesn't work. But you want the fourth notable, otherwise it doesn't function. Yep, that's the passive tree. Okay, on to the gem links. So the 6-link gem link on standard is item quantity, elemental damage with attacks, damage on full life, greater multiple projectiles, tornado shot, mirage archer. The only change you need to make for League is to swap out item quantity support, because it's a legacy option. You don't have access to this in League. Something like added cold, ice bite, or added lightning will fit into this gem slot nicely. In my gloves, I have Mortal Call linked to cast and damage taken. I have a low level cast and damage taken, a low level Mortal Call, specifically because I don't have a lot of life, so I want this proccing on moderate amounts of damage. I also have Summon Ice Golem and Blink Arrow in this setup, because I don't really have any other good places to put it. In my boots, I have Haste, Phase Run, Enhance, Increased Duration. This is just to really boost the effect of Val Haste, because we're not actually running Haste, the aura. We're only using this for Val Haste. And then this is also to boost the effect of Phase Run. When you use Phase Run with all this quality applied to it, it becomes a 62% increased movement speed Phase Run, which is very fast. In my helmet, I have Portal, Enlighten, Grace, and another socket. I'm gonna eventually put another Enlighten in here. I've gotten very lazy and not done it, but this is just so that I can level more Enlightens in my build. This I corrupted, and it's obviously not level 4, so it's not a good idea. I just haven't removed it from there, only because I don't have any other Enlightens to socket in this item. So I'm just using it for now as like a slight decrease on the Grace mana cost. Sync Link setup in the chest is Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark, Item Quantity, Herald of Ice, Onslaught, Ice Bite. So Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark, Herald of Ice is the real meat and potatoes of this setup. When you hit someone with Herald of Ice and Herald of Ice kills that thing and explodes, the Herald of Ice explosion will apply Assassin's Mark to the monsters surrounding that explosion, which will give you more. I'll read Assassin's Mark. It gives you increased. Hits against cursed enemies have plus 2.5% to base critical strike chance. Enemies take 20% increased extra damage from critical strikes, and you gain power charges when you kill people. So this is how we get power charges. Ice Bite in this build, when Herald of Ice kills something, gives us frenzy charges. Right? So that's how we generate frenzy charges and power charges in this build. I also have item quantity linked in this setup. Again, on standard, this is your option. In League, you can't have item quantity because it doesn't exist in League. So you want to put like Innervate on here for some extra lightning damage, item rarity, or you could just use this as a 5-link setup and run an extra lighten to level, something like that. You have options. So those are the gem links, those are the flasks, that's the passive tree, those are the items. As far as bandit goes, you want to take +2 passive points, or you want to take a Lyra to give you res and multi. And Pantheon is largely irrelevant for the build. Let me go to Sin and go talk to him. So Pantheon, I have Soul of the Brine King. The important one is you cannot be stunned if you've been stunned or blocked a stunning hit in the past 2 seconds. And then I also have a minor node, which is Soul of Shikara. You take less chaos damage, which is important because we obviously don't have any chaos resistance. So that's all I have for that. Let's see. That's the gems. That's the passive tree. That's the budget gear. That's the gear I use in standard. That's the options for League. That's the ascendancy. That's the offhands, Pantheon, Gem Links. Am I missing anything? Abyss Jewels. So Abyss Jewels are how we get a lot of our damage in this build. People always ask me, why do I have trouble clearing tier 5, T6, T7 maps? It's because your Abyss Jewels suck, right? So the way you have to think about the damage in this build is how much flat elemental damage we stack. So Wind Ripper itself gives you 53 up to 53 elemental damage and 88 lightning damage, right? So a total of, what is that, 140, 150-ish lightning damage, elemental damage, right? So Wind Ripper itself doesn't give you a ton of elemental damage. But think about my jewels, right? If you look at, this jewel, right? This gives me 51 plus 37 plus 72. That's 160-ish lightning damage, right? That's equivalent to my Wind Ripper in terms of damage. This jewel, right? 90 something, or was that 100 elemental damage, movement speed, and max life, right? This one, 130, 140-ish elemental damage. This one, again, like 150-ish elemental damage, plus 10 multi. So you can see how these jewels are so key to boosting your damage because they're equivalent to Wind Rippers in terms of like damage output, right? So the more of these you stack on your build, the crazier your damage is going to get. And that's pretty much how that functions, right? Do I have any other crazy Abyss Jewels? I don't think so. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how you get the damage. That's how you hit monsters and you kill them, is your Abyss Jewels. You can also get life on them. You can also get, you can get life on them. You can get all res on them. You can get other resistances. You can get attack speed if you crit recently. You can get all juicy stats on these things. And they're very key for helping you clear. And Legion and 3.7, they slightly nerf the damage on Abyss Jewels. It's relatively noticeable, but not so bad. Again, aim for the highest flat damage you can get on these things. My recommendation is that you skip life entirely. You skip movement speed. You just go for flat damage, resistances, and attack speed on these things, and you're good. Yep, that's that. That's the whole guide. This has been a long video. I have nothing else to add, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something here. I hope it was quick and down and dirty, and if you have questions, feel free to post them on YouTube. That's it. I'm Freud. I'm Cows, and I'm out.